Hey everyone, settle in. Really settle in. Tonight, we're wrapping ourselves in the heaviest blankets we own. The kind that feel like a protective spell against the world. A weighted comfort that pushes all the modern nonsense away. We're diving deep, deep down into the mud and the memory of one of the most quietly radical, genuinely weird, and honestly heartwarming stories to ever claw its way out of the sheer, stupid, industrialized misery of modern war. The time the soldiers in the First World War just stopped. They put down their guns, climbed out of their tombs in the earth, and decided to have a Christmas party with the very guys they were supposed to be killing. That's right. In the middle of the most brutal mechanized slaughter, the world had yet invented a conflict where men were reduced to statistics and cannon fodder, where the individual was erased by the machine gun and the artillery barrage. Someone started singing a carol. And for a few fleeting hours, like a crack in the fabric of reality, along hundreds of miles of front line, the guns fell silent. No generals screaming orders from chateaus miles behind the lines. No gas that turned lungs to bloody foam. No shrieking shells that tore the world apart. Just pure, unadulterated. Can we all just not do this for one day? Energy. It was a collective, unspoken agreement to press pause on the apocalypse, to mute the orchestra of hell just long enough to hear a familiar tune. So before we turn this cozy story time into an international incident of feelings, go ahead and like this video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy this kind of historical chaos. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now, dim those lights until the room is just a suggestion. A cozy cave against the night, a personal dugout for your mind. Turn on a fan for that sweet, sweet, constant white noise. A river of sound to carry you away from the present and into the past. Get comfy. Maybe grab a hot cocoa, because it's about to get very, very cold and very, very muddy. Let's begin. Let's just pause for a second. Have you ever been so bone-tired, so soul-crushingly cold, so utterly fed up with the absolute nonsense of your daily grind that you just shut it down? You look at the person across from you, your supposed rival in some office drama, and you realize you're both stuck in the same terrible, windowless, soul-sucking meeting that neither of you asked to be in. Now, multiply that feeling by 1,000. Strip away all comfort, all warmth, all safety. Replace the fluorescent lights with a sky full of shrapnel. Replace the boring PowerPoint with the constant threat of imminent death. What if your job was to kill each other from holes in the ground? And what if, outside those holes, under a sky full of indifferent icy stars, it was almost Christmas? Congratulations. You've just woken up in December, 1914. The Great War, the war to end all wars, is 5 months old, and the bright, patriotic paint has long since flaked off, revealing the rotten, rusty metal beneath. The grand parades are a hazy memory. The cheers have faded, replaced by the moans of the wounded and the endless, monotonous thunder of the guns. Everyone from the lowliest private to the most grizzled sergeant has already realized it's a catastrophic, soul-grinding meat grinder that has chewed up a generation and spit out the pieces into the frozen mud of France and Belgium. This was not an adventure. This was a trap that stretched for hundreds of miles, and everyone was caught in it. And somewhere in the waterlogged fields of Flanders, a young soldier is staring at a tin of corned beef like it holds the secrets to the universe. Across a strip of murderous mud called No Man's Land, another soldier, a mirror image in a different colored uniform, is humming a song his mother used to sing. The notes are a fragile ghost on the still, cold air, a tiny personal rebellion against the noise. Welcome to the wildest, most human ceasefire nobody in charge saw coming. Welcome to the Christmas Truce. Imagine this. It's the Western Front, deep winter, 1914. The air smells like a complex, awful cocktail of wet wool, cordite, decay, damp earth, stale tobacco, and a faint, stubborn hint of hope. It's a smell that gets into your clothes, your hair, your very soul. The world has gone mad, but down here in the trenches, the madness has become routine. The real enemy isn't the soldier 100 yards away. The real enemy is the mud that steals your boots, the rats big as cats, the trench foot that turns your feet into rotting stumps, and the bone-deep damp that never, ever leaves. Your world has shrunk to a narrow, zigzagging scar on the landscape. Your view is a parapet of sandbags, a sky the color of a week-old bruise, and a wasteland of churned earth, skeletal trees, and rusted barbed wire. You learn to read the sky for aircraft, the wind for gas, the sounds for shells. You become an expert in a world designed only for death. The soundtrack of your life is a relentless symphony of misery. A maddening drip of water, the scuttling of rats, the distant, earth-shaking thump of artillery, and the sharp, personal crack of a sniper's rifle. But the silence is the worst, because it's just the universe holding its breath before the screen. Maybe you're a London clerk named Arthur who joined up for a great adventure. Maybe you're a Bavarian farmer's son named Klaus who thought he'd see Paris and be home before the leaves fell. Now, your grand adventure is trying to keep your feet from rotting off. Your hands are chapped and cracked. Your uniform is a stiff, frozen second skin of caked-on mud. Your Christmas dinner is a can of bully beef and a rock-hard biscuit. But then, as December deepens, something shifts. The frantic, hate-filled energy of the first months bleeds away into the winter damp, replaced by a weary, exhausted numbness. The professional hatred, mandated by men in warm, dry rooms far from the front, begins to crack. A sense of we're all in this together seeps in, a realization that the mud, the rats, and the cold were no respecters of nationality. It starts, improbably, with trees. The Germans start putting up little Christmas trees, Tannenbaum, along their parapets. They decorate them with candles, and as dusk falls on Christmas Eve, they light them, one by one, then in clusters, until whole sections of the German line are twinkling. From across no man's land, it looks like a string of fairy lights has been hung up in hell. It's beautiful, alien, and tactically insane, but nobody shoots. Something, a shared thread of humanity, stops them. Then comes the singing. It starts in the German trenches. Still Nacht, Heilig Nacht, Silent Night. The voices are young and tired, but they carry across the frozen silence with a clarity that feels like a physical touch. For a long moment, the war disappears. There are no enemies, no empires, no kings. There are just boys, thousands of them, missing their homes, singing a song their mothers taught them. And then, from the British side, a response. Tentative at first, then a whole chorus, stronger, finding its courage. Silent Night, Holy Night, double quotes. The same song, different words, the same profound, aching feeling. The two melodies weave together over no man's land, a harmony no general could have planned. Carols volley back and forth like musical artillery. O come, all the faithful is met not with gunfire, but with the robust German harmonies of O Tannenbaum. It's a duel of nostalgia, a battle of who could remember home the hardest. Then a voice, loud and clear, shouts from the German side in clumsy English. English soldier, Happy Christmas. Come over here. Is it a trap? A ruse? But the voice sounds hopeful, human. Then you see him. A German soldier, climbing out of his trench, unarmed, hands up, walking slowly into the heart of no man's land. He was betting his life on a shared carol, on the hope that the man in the opposite trench was as tired and lonely as he was. This is the moment. Do you follow orders? Do you shoot the unarmed man who is just singing Silent Night? Or do you do something infinitely more revolutionary? Do you climb out to meet him? A British soldier makes the decision. He lays his rifle down, a deliberate, meaningful act. He hoists himself up into the open air, then another, and another. All across the line, the impossible happens. Men emerge from their holes, blinking in the dim light, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and wonder. They meet in the middle, in the very place designed to be their collective grave. Their boots sink into the same cursed mud, their breath mingles in the same cold air. They were just men. Scared, cold young men. And that's how the greatest, most unauthorized, most beautiful Christmas party in history begins. Not with a signed treaty in a gilded hall, but with a handshake in the mud. Let's break it down. Officially, fraternizing with the enemy is a court-martial offense. It's treason. It undermines the entire moral foundation of the war effort. It suggests that the man you are ordered to kill is, in fact, a man with all the complexity and humanity that entails. And that is a very dangerous thought for any army. Unofficially, everyone from the brigadier generals on down is about to have the most confusing, frustrating Boxing Day of their entire careers. The field telephones would soon be buzzing with a panic of a different kind, the panic of a narrative unraveling. The first interactions are painfully awkward, a pantomime of nervous smiles, gestures, and raised, empty hands. You don't speak each other's languages, but you both speak soggy soldier. You point to the knee-deep, liquid mud in your trench, the water that never drains, the eternal damp. You both sigh and shake your heads, a universal gesture of shared misery, a nonverbal, "Can you believe this?" Then you point to their little Christmas trees and give a thumbs up. They smile, broad and genuine, the first real, unguarded smiles you've seen in months, not the grimaces of fear or the false bravado for the officers. You fumble in your tunic pocket, the wool stiff with frost, and offer a cigarette a precious commodity, a small piece of comfort. They, in return, offer a piece of Lebkuchen, a spicy, cake-like German cookie, or a length of smoked sausage. It's the world's most high-stakes, most surreal potluck dinner, held in a cemetery, and the guest of honor is a fleeting, fragile piece. The economy of war had been replaced, momentarily, by the economy of gift-giving. Soon, whole sections of no man's land are swarming with soldiers in gray and khaki. They're swapping rations with the enthusiasm of schoolboys trading marbles, discovering the mundane exoticism of each other's supplies. British bully beef and McConaughey stew for German schnapps, cigars, and dark, hearty bread. They were trading not just food, but experiences. A taste of home for a taste of home. They're showing dog-eared, treasured photographs, carefully wrapped in oilskin to protect them from the damp. Pictures of wives, sweethearts, mothers, and children back home, their faces smiling from a world that no longer felt real. They're pointing at themselves, saying names. Friedrich, Tommy, William, Hans. They're laughing. These boys who had forgotten what it felt like to laugh. The sound is strange and wonderful, and out of place in the quiet air. A sound more powerful than any explosion, because it was creating something instead of destroying it. Jokes were told in broken languages and through elaborate gestures, and they were the funniest jokes anyone had ever heard, because they were jokes shared between supposed enemies. But it gets weirder and more wonderful. Someone, somewhere, produces a soccer ball. Of course they do. It's probably half deflated and patched up, but it was a ball. A sphere. A perfect, simple object from a world of complexity and horror. A symbol of normalcy, of life before the war, of Saturday afternoons in the park. And right there, between the water-filled shell craters and the tangles of barbed wire on the frozen rutted earth of no man's land, they play a game. There are no proper goals, just caps or helmets thrown down to mark the posts. No referees, no official score, no cheering crowds. Just men, dozens of them from both sides, kicking a ball around in the mud, slipping, sliding, laughing like children. their breath pluming in the cold air. Their shouts and curses in two languages blend into one universal language of play. It's the World Cup of human decency, played on the worst pitch imaginable, and for a few hours, everyone wins. The final score is lost to history, and it is the most beautiful, most unimportant detail of the entire war. The game itself was the victory. The act of playing was the truce. They even help each other out with the grim, necessary housekeeping of war, the macabre task that had become their daily reality. Hey, a British soldier might gesture, pointing to a dark shape halfway across the field. You see that body out there? Near the broken tree? That's one of ours. We'd like to bury him. Give him a proper send-off. And the other side, understanding the universal language of loss and respect, helps. Together, in joint working parties, they dig graves for their dead, side by side, their shovels biting into the same hard, unyielding ground. They hold improvised burial services, reading from scripture, British and German officers sometimes taking turns, their voices a solemn counterpoint to the earlier laughter. Enemies standing shoulder to shoulder, praying for each other's comrades, acknowledging the shared, stupid tragedy of it all. They were burying more than men. They were burying, for a moment, the hatred that had put them there. Can you even imagine the field reports being scribbled by bewildered lieutenants, trying to find the right words for the impossible, their hands shaking from more than just the cold? December 25th, 1914. Weather: bitterly cold, ground frozen. Enemy activity: exchanged plum puddings, sang carols. Played a friendly match of association football in no man's land. Casualties: none. Morale: confusingly, bafflingly high. Situation: unprecedented. How do you explain that to a general? How do you quantify a miracle in a military dispatch? Back at Chateau headquarters, with their roaring fires, detailed maps, and brandy decanters, the brass is losing its collective, well-bred mind. This is not in the manual. This is not how you win a war. You win by dehumanizing the other side, by painting him as a monstrous Hun, not by discovering his newborn son has the same name as your little brother. This was a disease, an infection of peace that could spread and cripple the entire war effort. You cannot have soldiers realizing that the enemy loves his mother too, that he misses his home too, that he is, in every way that matters, you. Dispatch riders are sent galloping along treacherous roads. Orders are screamed down crackling telephone lines. Stop fraternizing immediately. Resume hostilities. This is an order. Any man found consorting with the enemy will be court-martialed. The machine was fighting back against the spark of humanity. But down in the trenches, the orders feel distant, abstract, absurd, shouted from another planet by people who did not live in this world of mud and shared carols. How do you suddenly, mechanically, start aiming your rifle at the man who just gave you a gift of chocolate and showed you a picture of his dog? How do you throw a grenade at Friedrich, who is terrible at headers, but has a wonderful, booming baritone when he sings? The abstraction of the enemy, carefully constructed by propaganda and distance, had been replaced by the reality of a person with a name, a face, a story. And it is very, very hard to kill a person you have shared a laugh with, a person whose hand you have shaken. The orders were not just difficult. They felt morally incomprehensible. But that fragile peace didn't happen everywhere, and it certainly didn't last everywhere. In some parts of the line, it was over by Christmas morning, shattered by a nervous rookie firing at a shadow, or maybe an officer hell-bent on enforcing discipline at gunpoint. In other places, though, it lingered for days, even trickling into the new year. It was a stubborn little pocket of sanity in a world gone completely mad. Men would wave to each other from the top of their trenches in the morning, a silent good morning across the scarred earth. Sometimes they'd agree to fire symbolic volleys, shooting harmlessly into the sky just to satisfy the angry shouts coming from headquarters. It was a theatrical performance of war, a private joke between the men who knew the truth, a knowing wink to the guys in the opposite trench. There are even stories, maybe they're not all true, but they feel like they should be, of soldiers shouting warnings across the lines. Hey, we've got orders to shell your position at 0700. You might want to, take a little walk to the rear for a bit. It was a final, desperate act of humanity, a last-ditch effort to protect the friends they were never supposed to make. But eventually, inevitably, the vast, impersonal machine of war ground back to life. The truce's energy dissipated like mist in the morning sun, burned away by the harsh light of reality. A single nervous shot would ring out from a sector that never joined in, then another, closer this time. The magic, as fragile as a Christmas ornament, frayed and then shattered completely. With heavy hearts and long-last looks, the soldiers slipped back into their respective ditches. The muddy walls felt colder and more confining than ever before. It was like returning to a tomb after a brief, glorious resurrection. They picked up their rifles, the steel feeling cold and unfamiliar in their hands. The weight of them was a terrible burden, a betrayal of the handshakes they had just exchanged. The war remembered itself. It had only been napping. Yet nothing was quite the same. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't unsee the face of the monster in the opposite trench. The one who turned out to be just a homesick kid who was bad at soccer, had a sweet tooth and a wide, gap-toothed smile. The next time the whistle screamed and the officer shoved you over the top, you weren't charging at an anonymous enemy. You were charging towards Friedrich, the guy who shared his sausage with you. And that made the whole bloody, stupid business infinitely, unbearably harder. The war had become personal, and in doing so, it became 1,000 times more horrific. It's one thing to kill an idea, a faceless enemy. It's another thing entirely to kill a man you've sung carols with. The high commands on both sides were horrified when they found out. They learned their lesson from this dangerous, spontaneous outbreak of peace. They immediately rotated units out of the line, breaking up the bonds that had formed, scattering the men who had shared that Christmas to different, bloodier parts of the front. They hoped to dilute the memory, to quarantine the virus of fraternization. Stern, unequivocal warnings were posted. Any future attempts at friendship would be met with severe punishment, even execution. The authorities made sure, with the full weight of their power, that the miraculous Christmas of 1914 would never, ever be repeated on such a scale. And for the most part, it wasn't. The war descended into the even deeper, more technologically advanced, and utterly impersonal slaughter of Verdun, the Somme, and Passchendaele. Men would drown in mud and blood, and the notion of a friendly soccer match in no man's land would seem like a hallucination from a lost world. A dream everyone had collectively agreed to forget. But for one Christmas, in that first dark winter of the war, the common soldiers, the Tommies, the Feldgrau, the Paulus wrote their own story. It wasn't a story of kings and emperors and politicians, but a story of shared humanity. In the face of the machine, they were, for a moment, gloriously, defiantly human. They proved that the desire for peace, for connection, for a simple, ridiculous game of football in the mud is a force more powerful than any government's order, any general strategy, any ideology of hate. It was a spark in the overwhelming darkness. And though the darkness soon smothered it, everyone who saw that spark remembered its light. They carried that memory home with them, a secret, sacred thing. It became a story to be told in hushed tones long after the guns fell silent. Proof that even in the heart of hell, the human spirit could still, occasionally, sing. So tonight, as you settle into your warm, safe bed, with no rats scuttling in the corners, no mud caking the floor, no distant thunder of guns vibrating through the walls, take a slow, deep breath and remember. History is so often a chronicle of darkness, of our worst impulses, of the times we fell short. But it's also punctuated by these brilliant, fleeting sparks of light, like candles on a parapet, in a dead of night, brave and small and desperately beautiful. The 1914 Christmas Truce is a stark, beautiful reminder that even in our most divided, most violent moments, our shared humanity is still there. It might be buried, but it's waiting. Waiting for a silent night, a familiar song, a chance to climb out of our own trenches, whatever they may be, ideological, political, or personal, and meet in the middle, to see the face behind the monster and find a friend. It's proof that people are complicated, stubborn, fragile, and yes, capable of glorious, ridiculous, beautiful, and temporary acts of peace. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories about the sparks of light in our history. Sleep well. Dream of silent nights, of unexpected friends, of shared laughter in the cold, and of soccer games in the most unlikely of places. Good night.